Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back to my digital classroom. Today we're going to be continuing our summer reading playlist by discussing Wicked, The Life and Times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire. This is a classic retelling, so this is a spin-off of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, which is a classic children's literature piece, and Gregory Maguire has kind of made a name for himself for taking classic fairy tales and famous stories that we already know and creating a brand new narrative, giving you new details and new insights to characters based on his own interpretations of those characters. So this is actually a really cool read. A lot of people I have seen on BookTube have been a really big fan of the musical, and then they read the book. I came into this having no knowledge of the musical. I've never seen Wicked, but I have seen the movie The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I've never read that book, so I'm not quite sure how well the movie is a representation of that book, but I was surprised going into this because I was kind of expecting the story to be all about the Wicked Witch's perspective of what happens during the movie with Dorothy and everything. But this book actually takes you on an entire life journey with Elphaba, who is the Wicked Witch of the West. That's her name given to her by Gregory Maguire. And it's actually a play on the initials of L. Frank Baum, so Elphaba, which I thought was really cool. He uses the author of the classic literature piece to give the Wicked Witch a name because he didn't have the decency to give the character a name. Much like with Frankenstein's monster, he never got a name, and so a lot of times people would just attribute the name Frankenstein to the monster, even though the monster is never given a name. So just a really cool connection, parallel they make there. But I really think what may have surprised me the most about reading this novel is that The Wonderful Wizard of Oz book and film are a classic children's coming-of-age story about a magical land. It's an adventure. There's a magical wizard who can grant wishes, and Wicked the musical is, from what I know of it, is very positive. It's very upbeat. The music that I have heard is very catchy, but this novel does not give you a lot of feel-good, warm fuzzies. This is not a book that you read when you just want to feel good about the world and you want to feel optimistic about your future. Gregory Maguire does a fascinating thing where he takes a magical world and he makes it so painfully real and so much of a mirror of our real life, our real world, that it takes all of the magic, like this idea of sorcery and spells, it like takes it away and makes it mundane. So you're not gonna read this and be like, oh yeah, fantasy, oh this is so exciting. Like, no, everything is really normal. Let's start at the beginning. This novel is a complete life story of Elphaba, who is born green. We don't know why. There's not another character in the entire story who is green. You do find out a possibility of why she's different later on, but it doesn't give you an explanation for the color of her skin. So we see her parents before she's born. We see her birth, and then we see it jumps ahead to her toddling years when her family kind of adopts someone named Turtleshell. He is a glass blower from the Quadling country. So you have Munchkinlanders, you have the Quadling country, you have the Gilkenese, the Vinkus. There's all these different countries within the world of Oz, and they're all treated differently. You see inherent prejudices, classism, xenophobia. All of that is present in this text, all very true to the real world. And they start building that in early. So even before Elphaba is born, Gregory Maguire in his world building lets you know this world of Oz has a lot of conflict, and this wizard is supposed to be keeping everything together, but he's presented as kind of a usurper, that they had a leader and they had their own religion, and then the wizard arrives and they're all changing, what is expected, and he's presenting his own idea of how, Oz needs to be run. So you get that. Then after she's a toddler, it jumps ahead to her being at college where she's going to learn, and one of the things that you can learn is sorcery, but she doesn't choose sorcery. She's not interested in it. She thinks that it's kind of just parlor tricks and like not very useful. She finds more enjoyment in studying like natural sciences, and she studies under a professor named Dr. Dillamond, who is a goat, capital G, goat. So in the book there are animals that are just like what we consider animals, and there's capital A animals who are sentient. They understand language, they can be educated, and they can perform tasks like a human, and they are given jobs. But while Elphaba is in school, the rights of animals are being pulled back. And so she, having grown up green and been treated very differently because of the color of her skin, has developed this sort of hard shell of how she interacts with people. She's very cynical. She kind of makes herself the butt of a joke before other people are able to, and she's very quick-witted. She identifies deeply with the plight of the capital A animals, and she understands that it's completely inappropriate that they're being treated differently, and so she becomes an animal rights activist. When she leaves school, she becomes a political activist, and that kind of tears her world apart a little bit because she starts making enemies in some very powerful circles. She does experience some extreme trauma in her young adult life that I don't want to get too far into because I don't want to give you any spoilers, but it leads her to kind of a monastery where she's able to heal from that trauma, and then she moves forward trying to, make something of her life, to make amends with the world and set her course straight. So at no point in the novel do you see this character and think, oh yeah, she's wicked, oh yeah, she's evil. Gregory Maguire is presenting to you a flawed character. She's not perfect, she is flawed, but he's asking you to decide for yourself if she's wicked, if she's really evil, is she really the villain? She goes to a faraway land, she's seeking atonement, and she ends up living there for the duration of the novel. She starts experimenting with magic a little bit, but she's never very good at it. Like, it's not like she's able to curse an entire family. She can't just make food and money and stuff appear out of nowhere. She's just kind of a self-taught little sorceress. So the book is broken up into 5 parts, and you don't actually see Dorothy until the 5th part, and that's after we've gotten to know Elphaba, we've seen her grow up, and we've gotten to know her siblings. We meet Elphaba's sister, Nessa Rose Throp, who is born beautiful physically and visually, but she's alternately abled. She's born without arms, and so she is given magic shoes. Well, they're not magic at first. She's given a pair of shoes that her father crafts for her, and then Glinda, Elphaba's friend from college, kind of magics them to help with keeping Nessa Rose stable and upright so that she can walk and balance and everything on her own and kind of keep her on her own 2 feet. So those shoes are actually the ruby red slippers, but they're not red slippers in the book. So that was something that I thought was interesting, is that the shoes had value, that they were a family sort of heirloom, and that's partially why Elphaba wanted them. She has a younger brother named Shell, and we don't find out a whole lot about him, but I'm pretty sure we would find out more about him from Son of a Witch, the 2nd book in the Wicked series. The father does say that he's kind of incomplete, that he's searching for himself, so maybe Shell represents that he's kind of a shell of a man and that he has to try to fill himself in. Elphaba takes the death of her sister pretty hard, even though they never really got along, and Elphaba is not a very emotional person anyway, but she takes it kind of to heart, and she goes back home for the first time in a very long time and, talks to everybody, understands that Dorothy was in the house, and so she wants to, follow her and get the shoes back that Glinda gave to Dorothy, and she gave them to Dorothy as a means of trying to prevent a political coup. The shoes had become kind of symbolic of Nessa Rose, and she was not a beloved leader in her land when she, they're a ruling family, and so when she became the eminent Throp, people started calling her the Wicked Witch of the East because they thought that she was a dictator. She had very strong religious views, with her father being a preacher, that Elphaba never adopted, and when she was the Wicked Witch of the East, they just attributed Wicked Witch of the West to Elphaba, and so you find out how she even got that nickname. It had nothing to do with her doing anything evil or wicked. It had everything to do with mean political names that leaders get called, and then it just turns into its own living, breathing thing. Gregory Maguire is presenting you this character. You get to see her grow up, and then the question is given to you, is this character evil? What is evil about this character? Where is the true evil in Oz? And it makes The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, that story, that film, seem kind of like political propaganda, where you have the corrupt wizard and he's trying to spin the story to be the most beneficial for himself. And it was just such a cool read, and I really wanted to get attached to Elphaba. She's so closed off, she's so in her own world, and there's so much we don't know about her that it became hard. I kind of felt like I was, like if she were wearing a GoPro, I was just watching her live her life. And I never at any point felt like she and I could be friends. I never felt like she and I had any opportunity to build affection, because we don't really get into a lot of opportunities to see her being affectionate. And you can kind of think about like her fear of water, the fact that water really does harm her in this book as well as in The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. If you can't ever touch water, and if you cry and your own tears burn you, you would learn not to have any real extreme emotions, either really, really sad or really, really happy, because you don't want to risk causing yourself pain, which was also super cool. So she's emotionally stunted in that it's very difficult for people to build relationships with her and see her as a person, and it's difficult for her to experience emotion, because if she experiences emotion in too far of any extreme, it'll cause her physical pain. I feel like the argument can be made that she wasn't a villain at all. I feel like the argument can be made that the Wicked Witch of the West was a flawed person who lived a very difficult life, who had some very strong opinions about things. She wanted to be a animal rights activist. She wanted to fight for those who didn't have a voice. She tried to protect the people in her life, and sometimes she was successful and sometimes she wasn't, and the times that she wasn't successful, she took it incredibly personally, and she punished herself for not being good enough to protect the people that she loved. And you see a lot of inner turmoil for her, and I would love to have an opportunity to talk about this book, because there's so many things to touch on, but when you're just one person sitting in front of a camera offering an opinion in a summary, it's difficult to have a real conversation because there's nobody else bringing up points. So if you have anything that you want to ask, or if you have any specific things that stood out to you, please do leave those in the comments below. I would love to have a running dialogue about this text. And I don't know if I would ever teach it necessarily. I feel like it takes a lot of background knowledge to understand the text fully. I feel like you would want to read and watch The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. You would also want to watch Wicked, and then you could kind of talk about where this exists in that world. And you would also need to have a pretty strong understanding of world history and politics, so that you can see the parallels that were made. I was pleasantly surprised overall. She's a heartwarming character in that you want to root for her, but the story itself is so realistic and real world and gritty that it's something that you read and you're like, okay, I can relate to this. This is a character who understands what struggle means. This is a character who understands what it means to put everything into your beliefs and try your hardest and still not win. So I would give it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The only thing that kept me from giving it a full 5 stars is the fact that you feel so disconnected from her, and it's very difficult to love any of the characters, which is a positive talking point, but it's also a negative talking point. When you're someone who loves stories and you want to talk about how much you love a story, if you're not able to really connect with the characters. So like, I could put this down as a one read and not read the rest of the series and be okay with that. I feel like when a series sucks me in and I want to read every piece of information that exists about it, that's when it gets the 5 stars. That's when it gets the perfect rating. This went with the English 2 summer reading. It was one of the free choice novels. Everybody is required to read The Alchemist, but this is one of the short list of novels given, and this is the book that got the most votes from my students who were most interested in reading for the summer. So I hope you guys read it. I hope you're enjoying it. I don't know what would be easier for this book, if it would be easier to do the quotes or the chapter analysis, because it's broken into 5 parts and each part has its chapters within it. So that would be up to you. I think if I were doing it, I would probably break it up into the 5 chunks, and I would just summarize and explain the value of each of the 5 chunks, because they focus in on a different area of Elphaba's life, and that's how I would do it. Thanks so much, guys, for showing up, and I'll see you next time.